In the spirit of Kujichagulia, which is Swahili for self-determination, the Delta College Department of Ethnic Studies brings you Profiles in Equity and Excellence, a virtual presentation series for 2022-23. This speaker series will highlight Black, Indigenous, and people of color who are professionals and are advancing equity, racial, and social justice efforts in various contexts. All students, faculty, staff, and admin are welcome. Our first presentation features Eugene Bengen Gambol, Associate Professor of Asian American Studies at San Joaquin Delta College. Professor Gambol has taught in various Asian American Studies departments for the past 5 years on various topics: Asian American institutions and ideals, Asian American activism, and Asian American popular culture. He also is an organizer in the Filipino American community as a staff member for the National Alliance for Filipino Concerns and volunteer for the Filipino Community Center in San Francisco. Professor Gambol centers his work around local issues of immigrant workers' rights and supports human rights issues in the Philippines.
Okay, so I'm the newest faculty in ethnic studies at San Joaquin Delta College. A little background, I've been teaching at SF State and City College of San Francisco for the last 5 years in Asian American Studies and also the Metro program, which is kind of like an EOPS type of program. So how did I become a professor? And I think when I reflect upon my first moments of like my understanding of my own self, my cultural identity, my Filipino American identity, it all started from my experiences at Sacramento City College. And you'll see a lot of pictures here of some of my friends back in the day. And I think this was a pivotal moment where for many Filipino Americans, we don't necessarily know much about our history. A lot of us lose our language as a result of assimilating here into the United States. And the students here that you see, we're also kind of in the same situation. And I think a lot of us were hungry, had a lot of questions about what it meant to be Filipino American. And in the pictures, you see a very diverse group. I think we were very open to many different races and ethnicities in our organization, which was the Filipino Malay Heritage Society. This group of students ranging from, I think, Black, Latino, and then obviously Filipino, were kind of just trying to find themselves. And I think that's a common theme for a lot of community college students. They come into the community college thinking about what they're going to do in their lives. They didn't necessarily go to a four-year university. They were maybe not necessarily could afford a four-year university, which was my case. My parents didn't necessarily make a lot of money, but they had enough, I guess you could say, to kind of support my brother and my sister and the family back home. And so I was at Sacramento City College for like 3 years, and I'm guessing that's common for a lot of community college students. And my parents, they instilled this idea of education in me from a young age. And I think they wanted me to become a doctor. They wanted me to be an engineer. And I think I had like different plans, I guess you could say. With, oh, okay. With this group of students, it kind of helped me kind of come to my own, kind of find a community at Sacramento City College. And with that, we didn't necessarily just learn about our history and our culture, but we kind of also advocated for courses. So it was pretty historic in the sense that we were able to fight for a Filipino or Tagalog class where there wasn't one before. So students here became advocates. They became folks who wanted to get more involved in their community for sure. And that's not I guess, a common theme, our common value sometimes in the Philippine American community. Sometimes like you just put your head down, work hard, and hopefully things work out to kind of support your family. And I remember my parents kind of challenging me, asking me, why do you want to do ethnic studies, or what do you want me to do Asian American studies? And for them, they didn't necessarily understand that because they were recent immigrants here to this country. All they knew was like, what's going to put food on the table, what's going to pay the bills. And I think they weren't necessarily clear about what my kind of career goals were at that time. And that's probably where that is where a lot of students come from, in my experience of kind of traversing the many things at a community college level. So obviously, I was kind of going against the grain. I was making these waves in my own family. They were like, not necessarily opposed to what I was doing, but they for sure were kind of concerned about my career path. And I think this kind of speaks to my theme of this presentation, which is making waves, finding the Philippine American identity. And these waves travel on the surface of the ocean. You can see and feel their energy. Underneath the surface is where teaching happens. And when the water is in conversation with the wind, they give birth to generations of waves. Also, when you connect with the water, you can even initiate your own waves. So I think this is where I was stepping out in terms of my own comfortability and how I was kind of setting out my own path. And if you know kind of like the geography of the Philippines, we're surrounded by water. We're surrounded by some beautiful beaches. And we have a long history of navigating those oceans, those rivers for many, many centuries. And I think that's part of our indigenous culture in the Philippines. Okay, I got a couple people. I got a couple alumni in here from Sac City.
You know.
Wow. Really? There's a lot of y'all. Or a good number of y'all. So I was at Sac City for a good few years. I think it was one of those pivotal moments in my life. That's where I met Don Mabalon for the first time. She did a presentation like similar to this, talking about waves of immigration of Filipinos here in this country. And it's kind of coming full circle in terms of what I'm kind of doing today. We haven't talked about what else is there. So I'm just reading people's chats, making sure I'm recognizing folks. In terms of this theme of making waves, I didn't do this alone. I worked with my colleague and also mentor, Professor Allison Pintio Tobalas, who I met also at SF State when she was the director of the Pinoy Educational Partnerships. And this is a quote that I kind of pulled out from the lessons I've learned from her. Like our ancestors, we navigate life, use our personal compasses, stars, and intuitions to find our way. We circumvent obstructions and obstacles often created by systems and institutions that are not meant for our humanity. And we ride the waves with the strongest bangka, which is boat in Tagalog, that we have ourselves. And when we ride collectively, we are each other's authors. We become barangays or villages. And I think this kind of is one of those values that I kind of took out from my community college days. Where is my village? Where is my barangay? Where's my community? Sometimes it's kind of lonely trying to figure out how to kind of transfer out. And it's always great to see the support there and see folks, faculty, and staff who kind of also is going through the same things or have gone through it in their past lives. And through that, we were able to kind of come up with this theme of waves And I just want folks to kind of quickly read these waves of immigration. What I want to highlight here is Filipino Americans have been here for a while. And I think there's very important moments in American history that we are often kind of forgotten or silenced. And I think today I'll kind of touch on my own immigrant story and which eras or waves of immigration kind of reflect my experience. And the first wave started out in 1587. So on October 18th, 1587, the first Filipinos landed in Morro Bay, California. They arrived aboard the Nuestra Senora de Bueno Esperanza as part of the Manila galleon trade and established a fishing village and created a community in St. Malo in Louisiana. And I think this is important to highlight because it kind of shows Filipino Americans have been here for a long time, even before this country was established. And I think as a result of Spanish colonization, Filipinos who were versed in navigating the oceans now were able to come here because of the Manila galleon trade and basically establish communities in the Americas. And I think this is something that I didn't learn in my history books, and I think is kind of representative of like the silences and the things that we forget of the histories for communities of color. And because of like this feeling or thinking of like, I don't know much about Filipino American history, and at the community college, I was able to kind of get a taste of certain, a taste of like certain parts of that history. I was fortunate to take certain Asian American Studies courses there and eventually transfer out of Sacramento City College with a, I guess, an AA in ethnic studies. And after Sacramento City College, after that wonderful time being involved in my community there, advocating for a Filipino class, the next step for me was, I guess, step out of the household, make a life separate of my family. And I transferred off to UC Irvine, and I got my BA in Asian American Studies and a minor in poli-sci. I was very involved in their student organization, which was Kababayan at UCI. So you see a picture of myself. So the bottom picture to the left is a cultural dance group that I was part of. And then if you're not aware, there's these Filipino cultural nights at certain universities, a few community colleges. And they, sorry, my daughter's walking in the middle. You want to say hi to everyone?
There's a VIP in the building. Show us the VIP.
There's ice cream.
Oh my God. The timing is great, always. You want to say hi?
By the way, y'all, I did hear that Professor Gambol is Father of the Year. So on top of all of this, no, I'm not going to tell you my sources, but on top of all of this wonderful inspiration, this guy has some beautiful children.
So I've been photobombed by my kids many times in class, so this is not new. Now I have to figure out where I'm at on my screen. Who do y'all see? Because I don't see too much on my
An ocean apart, so the college years and
that's the one. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me resume sharing. So that's Nara. She's my eldest daughter. Her name basically means a tree in Southeast Asia. It's kind of like mahogany. It's strong and it blossoms beautiful flowers. So that's her. I also have a son. His name is Fatad. and it comes from a province in the Philippines that basically means if there's an issue amongst the different villages, the different tribes unite to kind of fight for justice. So those are my children, and I have a beautiful wife named Princess, and yes, that's her real name, Princess. But yeah, where am I at? As I got distracted. An ocean apart. So I transferred out of Sacramento City College, kind of made my own path, made my own waves. And I think with that experience there, I was able to study abroad in the Philippines for about a year. So, which is rare. I don't believe the program exists anymore. So I was able to take classes over there. I was able to volunteer at a nonprofit called the Focus on the Global South. So a lot of my education was really just experience. So what can I do to kind of learn about my community, not just in the books, but interacting with people, dancing with folks and learning the history of those dances. And then with this wonderful group of young students, we were able to spend a whole year in the Philippines, kind of just gallivanting or running around the Philippines, in Manila, in different parts of the Philippines, exploring the beautiful islands there. And this was very important in terms of my own kind of growth and development. I say that because as a Filipino American born in the United States, not knowing much about its history, I think when I stepped off the plane, there was like this kind of feeling of like deep emotions, like this is where I should be. And then also emotions of like, why has it taken me so long to be here? And I think that's a lot of emotions kind of were experienced during that whole year, which is trying to understand myself as a Filipino and a Filipino American. Many of them over there saw myself as an American. They didn't see myself as a Filipino. And I think trying to understand that dynamic and understand my own kind of position of, am I Filipino versus am I Filipino American or just American? And I think that was a very important part of my cultural identity development. So as I kind of came back to the United States, I wanted to learn more about my family history. I kind of got a sense interviewing my parents through my undergraduate experience. And I think after the visit in the Philippines, it kind of gave me a different context to their challenges as immigrants here in the United States. So this is a picture of my parents. My dad is holding me with his long brown hair. He was an accountant. He came from a farming family in Pangasinan, which is the northern part of the Philippines. They owned a small tract of land. They kind of grew rice there. And with that, they were able to send my dad to college. And eventually, he was able to immigrate here to the United States. And similar to my mom, her parents owned a small grocery store or tindahan. And it's not like a Rayleigh's, but it's, if you've ever been into the Philippines, it's just a little shack or a small kind of grocery store. And they were able to save enough and send her to nursing school and then immigrate here in the 70s. So my dad and my mom, Norma and Marcelino, came here to kind of fulfill this American dream. And in the Philippine educational system, as a result of American colonization, they learned about the history of the United States. They learned about A is for apple, and they learned about snow, and there's no snow in the Philippines. And they for sure kind of were drawn here because of the American dream. And I think this is common for a lot of immigrants that come. And as a result, because of their success as professionals, because of the immigration policies of that time, my parents were able to come here to the United States and sponsor their parents. And this is where our kind of our story begins here in the United States. As I kind of dig deeper into my family's history, I learned more about my dad's side. I had a grandfather, the brother of my grandpa, who came here during the early 1900s as a sakata, which is like a worker in the fields in Hawaii. And there I have a small, I guess, representation of Gambols in Hawaii, distant cousins, uncles, and aunties there. And again, learning more that, oh, even my own history, my family history starts before my parents. And I think a lot of things open up when I kind of discover these things about my family. And as I read and study about my own history as Filipino Americans, we learn about this idea that the US was, the Philippines was colonized by the US, and Filipinos were nationals in this country, which basically meant they were free to come here and immigrate here, but they didn't necessarily share the benefits of like a US citizen, of the ability to vote, or the ability to kind of own land, or and I think this kind of speaks to a lot of the challenges Filipino Americans face here in this country, learning about the American dream, but experiencing the challenges of being in this national or US national kind of status. And this kind of resonates even till today, in the understanding of, am I Filipino, am I American, and what does that mean? And a lot of my Filipino American students kind of are figuring out, oh, I don't know much about my parents, their history. I don't know how they got here or why. Some of the assignments that I kind of push them and encourage them to kind of learn about that. And I think hopefully that kind of opens up communication, which is very hard in the Filipino family, and also understanding where our parents are coming from, and the parents also understanding where the students are coming from too, in terms of growing up here. And for my parents, they came here during the late 60s and 70s, and there was a big influx of Filipino professionals. And also there was a political unrest. There was the martial law in the Philippines under the dictator Ferdinand Marcos. And I think under this particular regime, many Filipinos had to flee because of the injustices that were happening under his watch. And because of, on this end, Americans' policies of kind of being more inclusive in terms of different groups coming here to this country, the quotas for the Philippines was increased, and many of the Philippines took advantage of escaping the turmoil in the Philippines and making a better life here in the United States. And we see a brain drain of professionals coming here, nurses, doctors, and other professionals, kind of supplementing the needs of the industrial needs, employment needs of the United States, as it was a growing power at the time. And this kind of speaks to my experience at SF State. So I was a graduate student and also community organizer at SF State. With all the different journeys I've taken with studying abroad in the Philippines, studying at UC Irvine and getting my BA in Asian American Studies. I think the people that I always ran into were the folks who organized during the 60s and 70s. And many of those who were involved in the community were part of the anti-martial law movement. And I think that's because many of them were coming to their own political consciousness or their own kind of understanding of who they were as a Filipino American. And the martial law movement became a way for them to kind of not necessarily just address issues here in the United States for Filipino Americans, but how does it relate to what's happening back home? And my thesis basically was around Filipino American student activism during that period of time. And I think some of the history that we kind of learn about don't necessarily talk about students' perspective and their role in kind of creating social change. And I think that was important for me to kind of highlight, especially with the importance of the civil rights movement and what that meant for a lot of marginalized communities. And as I was learning more about the activism in my community, I got involved with student organizations on campus. So I was part of the League of Filipino Students. So you see a picture here of us. We also went to the Philippines in 2006. We were there for about a month. So there was about 13 of us kind of backpacking throughout the northern part of the Philippines. And I think we saw a lot of injustices and human rights issues that were happening at that time. And that kind of influenced my activism because I was able to kind of listen to the stories of a lot of the families that were kind of victims to a lot of the extrajudicial killings of as a result of I think the current president or the president at that time was Macapagal Arroyo, and with her administration, a lot of progressives, activists were challenging her authority because of all the different atrocities happening under her watch. And I was able to stay with a family in the southern part of Luzon. And their son was just murdered, I believe, a week ago before we arrived. And we were supposed to see him and talk to him and learn about the student organizing happening on his campus. But unfortunately, we were there to kind of be there for his funeral. And that kind of speaks, also was very emotional. And I think inspired me to kind of fight for human rights issues in the Philippines. So these exposure programs were pivotal in kind of my own development. And I kind of appreciate that experience. And then the below picture. So that's my mentor, Professor Sunny Vergara. And he was coming up for tenure at SF State, and we were fighting for his tenureship at that time, which is kind of crazy. I was trying to finish my master's thesis, and then he was just trying to fight for his job. And at the university level, if we were advocating for his kind of continuance of him working there. And I think, unfortunately, he wasn't able to kind of get tenure. He wasn't able to continue teaching. I think he was in the anthropology department. And that kind of was a lesson to me, like, oh, higher education is another battlefield or another place for me to kind of navigate through because of the challenges for communities of color. And we see that Black and Brown folks aren't necessarily well represented at this level. And I think we did our best to fight for our mentor, but unfortunately, we weren't able to fight enough, I guess. And he's happier now, I guess. He does research still, but for another nonprofit. So these experiences kind of speak to why I'm so invested in my community and why I'm kind of like always fighting for the most marginalized, And going back to the waves of immigration speaks to kind of like this generation, or the post generation ZX and millennials. I think the Filipino American community is growing. It's the fourth largest immigrant group after Mexico, India, and China. And we as Filipino Americans are going through a lot, especially the second and third generation folks. Teaching at SF State at City College, I've learned a lot of students are going through mental health issues. It's hard for them to kind of graduate on time. And I think because of the stuff that they're experiencing at the home or in their communities in terms of maybe poverty, gang violence, and these kind of challenges for this generation and future generations is things that we kind of have to face and kind of resolve and address. And I think this generation is hopeful. A lot of the students that I've worked with in different spaces, be it on campuses and or in the community, are on the ground making that social change in their own eyes. And I think this next generation is hopeful. And I just want to kind of conclude with this, that there's power in the youth, and that's why I teach. I'm always amazed by students, their perspective, their passion for life, their passion to kind of build a better future. And I think I was taught the same thing 20 plus years ago as a student, and I think kind of moving that forward, kind of continuing that legacy that I've kind of learned from our ancestors, those before me, especially individuals like Don and other professors and other community folks that have inspired me. And you'll see pictures here with my family. We're very involved in the Filipino American community. So in 2015, it was the 50th anniversary of the Delano Grape Strike, and Filipinos played a major role in that workers movement. And I think we often hear like the Mexicans and Cesar Chavez and their contributions, and Filipinos were very involved in that work too. They were a catalyst to a lot of the things that were happening of that time in Delano. And I think we were celebrating the 50 years of that important moment with the Delano Grape Strike. And you'll see a picture of Dawn with my daughter and my partner. And we organized that event that kind of brought in folks from all over California. Different student organizations for sure were heavily involved in this and well represented. I believe we had also the current Attorney General, Rob Bonta, speak there, and also the children of Johnny Idleong, who was one of the agricultural labor leaders at the time. And I think with that history and us kind of fighting for what is right, that kind of is something that I try to instill in my own kind of children too. So in 2016, we were able to kind of go back to the Philippines. So there's this recurring theme of like going back home and kind of reconnecting to our roots. So my daughter and my wife and I were able to go back home. And you see my daughter putting up her fist. That's the same one that walked in earlier. And we were at a rally, a march, fighting for women's issues in the Philippines. So me and my partner are connected to a lot of the social movements that are happening back home in the Philippines. And then finally, in 2019, you'll see me holding my son, Fatad, in front of my friend. So Brandon Lee was a student of SF State. He's Chinese American. He he committed his life to the people in the Philippines. He went to the Philippines to help the indigenous communities there. And as a result of his great work, because of his activism, he was a threat to the Philippine government, as he kind of was critical of their role in suppressing the rights of indigenous communities. And as a result, he was shot. It was in his back a few times. and he was able to survive and come to the United States to get the medical attention that he needed. And he's still advocating for those communities here in the United States, doing presentations in classrooms in the community. So these kind of moments in my life kind of speak to this continuing kind of struggle, this fight for the Filipino American community, and the ways in which that kind of inspires me to push on to get more folks involved in whatever way we can. So that's all I got. I think it's Q&A time, but yeah.
Thank you so much. Can we give some like online snaps, claps, reactions? Love to Professor Gambol for sharing, for opening up and sharing. And I'm in a classroom that's dark right now. The lights, I gotta move, right? Thank you so much for sharing. Certainly inspirational. And we are very, very fortunate to have you on campus. So I would love to open up for questions for anybody who has any personal questions to Professor Gambol about your journey to becoming who you are. I'm looking for hands, or you can post your questions in the chat. What course are you currently teaching, Professor Gambol?
I am currently teaching the Intro to Asian American Studies. This is like my beginning course I took a long time ago. So,
and that's Ethnic Studies, ETHNS
36.
36. So to experience Professor Gambol in person, enroll in Ethnic Studies 36 in the spring. There is a question in the chat that I see that says, what does dawn mean to you?
Oh, that's a lot. That's a heavy question. She was that presenter in my community college class that opened my eyes to our history. She became my mentor at SF State in my graduate work. And then she became my colleague and friend as I kind of taught at SF State. So it was hard to see her pass away. And I think
it's okay.
Yeah, we feel you. We feel you.
Yeah.
She passed away in 2018, unfortunately. But I think her spirit lives through me, at least.
Yes.
And I think she means a lot for sure. I think
yes.
I remember, sorry.
Don't apologize.
She's been there since the beginning, and she's still with me today. I think we just had that wonderful event this past weekend commemorating all her success with Little Manila and with the fight at Stockton with that, and remembering that history in Stockton. So I think she means a lot to me. I could speak about her all day, but I think, yeah, there's not enough words to kind of explain the energy, the inspiration. She was sharp, she was smart. She was able to bring people together. She was able to kind of do what was right for our community. So I think that's what is important about her.
Professor Gambol, I just came back from Ghana in September. And one of the things that I learned that struck me is that our beloved, family members, friends, humans don't die, we just travel. So she's traveling in a different energy form. And certainly we can feel her coming through you with your work and your spirit. So that means she lives on. And thank you for, being such an example of humanity right now, which is what we need so much. So thank you. There are other questions that have come through the chat. One of them, well, somebody says that
they're learning a whole lot in your class. So that's fantastic.
Gladly.
This is a big question. What maybe a couple critical issues that are confronting Filipinos today?
I think for students, what
Yeah.
what
Thank
I've
you.
learned for sure is like their mental health is a heavy thing. Like every semester, there's always students coming up to me, especially during the pandemic, with their family challenges and just trying to figure out their lives. Be it like, is this the career, or this is the degree I want to get, or they're going through stuff personally with their friends and their family members. And I think the pandemic opened up more about like having that empathy and sympathy with folks. So mental health for sure has been, I think, the common trend the last 5 years, at least in my classes. And I often do community projects where they would report on issues, and this is always the one on the top of the list. And students are going through mental health, either be it depression, anxiety. Some people for sure have gone through different types of abuse, and be it with their partners or family members. And I think there's a lot that our community is holding down, but I think there's services that still needs to be kind of put out there. And we're fortunate that there's a lot of Filipino American counselors coming up, higher education and in general. So I think that is a good sign. And I think that's one of the major issues that's personally folks are going through.
I think it's across the board too, folks
Yeah.
across the board. So thank you for pointing to that and for bringing this up. This might be a little bit more of a lighter question. And then I also see a couple more questions. So this one is lighter hearted. Any more trips to the Philippines in the foreseeable future?
Who asked that? I always try to go back every few years, like every 4 or 5. I do have 2 little ones, so my youngest, but God, hasn't gone yet. So should be soon. I took my daughter when she was 2 or 3. She loved it. You can't replace learning about the Philippines on books. You need to be there in person, and I think that's key. Do I foresee? I would love to go there soon. Things are opening up, especially after the pandemic. The regulations have been pretty strict, and like you had to stay in a hotel for 2 weeks before you could even go into the general population. So I was like, why would I even go there and stay in a hotel for 2 weeks? So I think things are better now. And my partner wants to get married there. So I don't know. We'll see.
Destination wedding in store. Okay. Okay, Professor Villavicencio has a hand raised.
Yes.
Hey, thank you so much, Malika, and thank you, Eugene, for that wonderful, wonderful presentation. It resonated a lot with me because I am a fellow Filipino American, and I was born in the Philippines. Didn't know you were actually born in Chicago. So that was really, really neat to know. Before I get to my question, if you don't mind me adding on to sort of the previous question in terms of issues affecting the Phil-Am community, and I'll bring up higher ed here. I know here with FCAPE and Apiasa, we are trying to resurrect Tagalog. Here offered at San Joaquin Delta College. We in fact offered it a number of years ago, and we are now working, of course, with the Modern Languages Department to reactivate that, and other Asian languages, of course, as well. We serve 6%. I think the data shows that 6% of our student population are Filipino or Filipino Americans. And that's actually a significant number if you take a look at that, right? So that's one of the initiatives that we're trying to do. And Eugene, as part of FCAPE, and again, sharing that in this space, if you are able to help support us in that initiative, we would be grateful. I think another big issue with PhilAm, with Filipino Americans, and as well as Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders in general, is the model minority myth, right? And, you know, with Filipino Americans in general too, you know, it's interesting that most people tend to believe that you know, a majority of NHPI students attend 4-year universities or top, you know, public private universities. That is not true. Where are they? Here in California? They are with us here within the California community colleges. In fact, if you actually break down the data, Filipino Americans are actually underrepresented at University of California as well as California State Universities. So yeah, I mean, that should be surprising. I think I know it was in a way to me, but not really that surprising at all. And another big issue, I think, that PhilAm's as well as the broader NHPI community also has are DACA students. You know, the very first DACA student that received DACA was Asian American. This is a issue that you know, spans all immigrant communities, to be frank, right? But within the NHPI community, especially within the Filipino community too, there's a stereotype. I'm sorry, there's a stigma that's associated with being undocumented, and that only a small percentage of, you know, NHPIs and Filipino, especially Filipino Americans, actually take advantage of the resources that are afforded to DACA. So sorry for mentioning that. I hope that's also clear because of my role as a political science professor here on campus. But Eugene, my question to you in terms of activism here, you know, your role as part of, you know, being an ethnic studies professor now here on campus. I was just curious what your, you know, what issues are you thinking of championing in the future?
Professor Gambol, please.
Where do I start? So I think, thank you, Dr. Williams, for organizing all this. And I think in terms of BIPOC folks, communities of color, and the similarities and the challenges that we face, I think Asian Americans, African Americans are the Latinx folks, Native Americans, for sure going through similar challenges of the ways the institution, education has kind of forgotten them. And I think as we kind of create these spaces, create more conversations to kind of speak to what's happening in our communities and finding the solidarity amongst these groups, we could kind of push forward a lot of these issues to not just locally or in our own campus, but this is happening all over, statewide, nationally. And I think what I'm learning in the spaces in the last 10 weeks is like folks are involved, they're active, they're parts of different spaces locally, nationally. And I think what do we need to kind of do to put those pieces together? I think I'm still learning. And I think with FCAPE, they're giving me a great understanding of what's going on within the Asian API community. And with the initiatives that they're pushing around, like the Filipino classes, it's important. And that's something close to my heart because I had to fight for that a long time ago. And it's still a fight, which is what's going on. I think even with Delta College, learning about your history, like we had these courses back in the day. And I think, what do we need to do to kind of revive all that? And I think what I've learned the last 10 weeks is that there's folks who are down to do that work. And I hope to kind of support in whatever I can in my own kind of capacity. And I think building those bridges that need to be built, creating those spaces that kind of need to be established to kind of give students, faculty, a voice in that way. Whatever I can do to advocate and be there for folks. What's the other parts of it? So there was the Filipino thing. I forgot the other part.
By the way, y'all, I would love to say that this year we are working on the AA in Intro to Asian American Studies, in the Intro to Black African American Studies AA, the AA in the Intro to Chicano Studies, and the AA in Intro to Native American Studies. So by the fall of 2023, y'all, in a perfect world, we will have AA programs, which this guy who's on the screen right now will be a part of creating as well. So we're very, very excited to get those kicked off in process. But yeah, we're very excited to get those going. Hey, there's an interesting question in the chat. Can I refer back to the chat for a second before we move forward, or are you in the middle of processing the last question still?
I think I think it speaks to what you're speaking to with AA.
Okay.
Siri or Dr. Villavicencio was mentioned this challenge for not just Filipino Americans in terms of retention at the 4-year at the community college level. We see that the model minority is a myth, and I think for many communities of color and being forgotten in our history, and for Asian Americans who've kind of been wedged between different groups sometimes to kind of distract us from the realities of folks are struggling, students are struggling, certain groups, especially Filipino Americans, Southeast Asians, our Pacific Islander folks doesn't fit this model minority kind of persona. And I think the society has lumped us together. It's kind of in the past has lumped us together to kind of marginalize us from the general population. And I think this tactic has been used in many different contexts, politically, socially. And the model minority, I think Filipino Americans are kind of really bringing up like, yeah, we're not, we have mental health issues that we are suffering through. I think there's a study from my colleague, Kevin Nadal, talking about how the model minority is detrimental to our communities, where we're not able to speak to like issues that are happening, for example, drug abuse or teenage pregnancies or HIV and AIDS pandemics in our community. And these are things that we should be addressing and finding ways to support our students in any way. And with a lot of the austerity policies that have been kind of implemented in like cutting programs, cutting departments, I think, yeah, what do we need to do to kind of just challenge those institutions that aren't speaking from these communities? And I think building these AA programs are important, a goal for them to work towards, to find themselves, I hope, in whatever degree that they go towards. I think studies has saved my life in different ways. And if they want to kind of continue that, whatever career path that they have, if they become educators, that's great. If they become engineers and educate folks in their firms, that's great. If they become nurses, they educate folks about their own stuff that they've learned here in the hospitals, that's even better. So again, how do we kind of move this stuff, awareness forward, and support the many, many needs in our community. Yeah, that's my response to that.
Awesome. You ready for an interesting question?
Sure, always.
All right, check this out. Is it part of your culture to send money back home to your family? My friend who is Filipino does, and there's the question, is that expected? This is from my student, Miss Chris Tucker.
Oh, thank you, Kristen. Yes, it's part of our culture. I think because many of us are Filipino Americans, their families come here as a result of it's very poor in the Philippines, and it's hard to find jobs. And I think many of the Filipinos leave and work abroad. And the expectation for them is, because they're the heroes or sheroes in their families, they're making it big in whatever job they're in the Middle East, in different parts of Asia, here in the United States. These folks kind of have to support not just themselves, but their families back home, because they don't have that capacity or ability to do that because of the social and political kind of inequalities that exist in the Philippines. So my parents have done it in the past. I still do it. I have cousins always trying to ask me for financial support. And that's because I'm in a privileged position to say that, yes, I can support you in that way. And understanding that, because I go back pretty often, and I see the challenges living there, and see the lives that they kind of have to kind of go through. And yeah, it's a lot easier to transmit money these days. You just Venmo it or whatever. So yeah, the magic of technology. Folks are expected to support their family back home. So yeah. And I think that's common in other cultures too.
Yeah.
Like, I have students who are like, oh, I have to go back home to Mexico to support my family because of X, Y, and Z. Like, oh, you're going beyond just sending them money, you're going back and doing things. So yeah, I think the relationship with the homeland and to what you're doing here is always a constant. Yeah, you're never like disconnected by what's going on, and you find any way you can to kind of be there for your family.
That's right. That's right. And, thank yous are going out to you, for sharing, and a reiteration of the importance of helping back our elders and those who have, migrated here, or our families in distant lands and not so distant lands. So thank you very much. I don't know if there's any more questions. You can just raise your hand, or you can say it out loud if you'd like. We have about 5 minutes left, but one question that did come through the chat was, how is this recording going to be made available? Well, as soon as we're done, I will turn it into a YouTube video. It will be housed in the Profiles in Equity and Excellence Kujichagulia Self-Determination series. Can y'all say that? That's a mouthful, right? That's a mouthful. But anyway, we will be creating a playlist that will house all of these wonderful presentations, and Professor Gambol will be our very first. And so we will get this done. Normally it takes a while to process the video. You got to get it sent back and then upload it and blah, blah, blah. But we will be sharing this with campus community, and then professors, you can share it with students. I know I will share it with my students as well. And so yes, so that you can capture it, replay it, share it with students, make it reach far and wide. So thank you for that question. Look out for the video. It will be coming, if not later today, definitely by tomorrow. So yeah, okay, we have a few minutes left. Any more questions? I think there's one question, it's probably a big question, but it says, what do you see in your future? Ooh. What do you see in your future? In 3 minutes, can you tell us what you see in your future, please?
In particular to Delta College, I'm tenured track. So in the near future, I will be tenured and will be here for a while. And I think I want to be a resource to folks. I wish I was in person with y'all so I could actually meet you in person. I just see names, but hopefully if you see me on campus, I'm on campus on Mondays. Please introduce yourself. I'm willing to have a cup of coffee with folks anytime. But yeah, what do I need to kind of do? What needs to be done to build the communities, our communities here at Delta College? And I think I've seen folks who are directing different spaces, who are leading different committees and task forces. And I think things are moving for sure. And well, I'll speak to my last institution. Ooh, hot mess. But yeah, y'all got a good thing going on. I'll just say that, and I appreciate the good kind of vibes, and I'm open to kind of have that cup of coffee.
Okay, so maybe you can hook up with Brianna because she dropped the bomb of all bombs, like 2 minutes before we're Brianna, like that is probably one of the most heavy hitting and most, pertinent questions to ask. What are some ways to combat poverty in the Philippines as a Filipino American or as an American in general? You better set up a coffee day. I think you need to set up a coffee day for that.
That's like a course, but the course is not even
That's a whole class.
all of it.
I think I need to teach that course with you.
That's a big question. And I think community folks here, community folks back there are still dealing with it. So this is what is kind of perpetuating this poverty, or what is creating these social economic inequities that exist in the Philippines is an important question. And I think folks have different interpretations and different ways to address it. And I think as a community, we should figure that out. But having that conversation is the first step, I guess, to kind of figure that out. And
awareness, yeah, educating and awareness.
I think, I've worked in different spaces. Some people have great ideas, some folks have conflicting ideas. So I think, that's a quick way to answer that question.
Stay tuned and look out for more presentations from the Ethnic Studies Department that can speak to these issues, ongoing. Yes. And we are very, very thankful to have you. I wish you could hear the applause, the snaps, the claps. One more time, if we could give it up one more time to our amazing Professor Gambol. We are so blessed to have you. Thank you for inspiring us. Thank you for choosing us. You my road dog now, man. We gotta stick together, man. It's me and you. Thank you, everybody. This is a wonderful way to kick off Profiles in Equity and Excellence. Let's see each other on November.
Please browse our exciting lineup of presentations for the rest of the year, and we welcome you to join us on November 8th, when we will feature Tiffany Herndon, Senior Director in Equity Strategy for Aspire Public Schools and founder of Nzinga Incorporated in Stockton, California. Thank you for joining us in our very first session of Profiles in Equity and Excellence. May peace be with you always, and see you next time.